Hey guys, how's it going? Srey here, and I am back today with another How Good Is video. Today it's featuring Genji, and Genji is of course the newest hero in Heroes of the Storm. He comes from Overwatch, where he has a very reminiscent play. He plays pretty much the exact same in Heroes of the Storm. So his play is essentially poke from range until they get low, and then clean up and function as a janitor. He's a mix of a ranged and melee assassin, in the sense that he has ranged abilities, but you have to generally be pretty close to actually do damage to the enemies. And three of his four basic abilities, including his D, are actually defensive or mobility. He only has one DPS ability. So you have to use your mobility to effectively put sustained damage on the enemies until they get low. So I think that's a pretty wise design choice from Blizzard. It makes him really feel like a character from Overwatch, or how he played from Overwatch. His wave clear is quite bad. It's some of the worst wave clear in the game, which kind of balances the fact that he has the best mobility in the game. And if he had good wave clear, he'd probably be the best hero in the game. But he doesn't. So let's talk about his basic abilities first. First thing I want to mention is that his basic attacks actually function similar to Tracer, but not identically. So you can see that when I attack a target dummy here, not only do I shoot multiple attacks at one time, but I can kind of move while attacking. Now, it's not pure moving while attacking. You have to actually click the target here. So if I just run by, it won't auto attack like Tracer would. But it is kind of a hybrid. So you can attack while moving, but not to the full extent. And you're going to need to get quite good at orb walking on Genji, but it is quite easy since his attack animation is quite long. You can cancel if you want. So if I use my dash ability, you don't have to use the full attack. You can see that it cancels before that. So you don't have to use your full attack animation. 3 attacks per second also mean a number of other things for like a new Brex Cocoon, so you can cancel that early because there's more attacks, or if you're trying to get the chest on Blackheart's Bay, it will break fairly quickly. So let's go over his main abilities. So first we have Shuriken. You throw 3 Shurikens in a spread pattern, each dealing damage to the first enemy hit, and you can store up to 3 Shurikens. Shuriken's cooldown replenishes all charges at the same time. So you can see here that the cooldown is 12 seconds, but from the time I use the first Shuriken, the ability just looks like this, it goes on a 12-second cooldown. I have toggle cooldowns on. You can see that it'll start going on a 12-second cooldown. And after the 12 seconds from the first time I use a Shuriken, all charges will be refreshed. So you can see that the ability is about to finish. So if I use 2 charges just before, I can then use 3 more in a row. So I can have almost 5 charges. So you can kind of do things like that. But generally, you won't hold them to kind of burst because it's quite hard to do that. And you'll just use them as needed. You can see that it's the first enemy hit. So after the first enemy, the charge no longer goes through. The shuriken doesn't go through. But you can also hit an enemy with multiple charges. I can hit the 2 there, or I can even hit with all 3 to do more damage. You have to be basically in melee range, which is why I've kind of said that he is kind of a melee hero, because if you even go a little bit further away, you won't be able to hit all 3. You have to be pretty much directly beside a hero to hit them. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it can be quite difficult. It can be quite important, sorry, to do that. It also uses 15 mana, which is quite low. You don't really have mana problems on Genji unless you're spamming your abilities, but usually you're not. That's something to note. Deflect is his W, is a 16-second cooldown, and you channel for 1.25 seconds, becoming protected and blocking damage. Any damage blocked while channeling causes Genji to throw a kunai towards the nearest enemy, prioritizing heroes and dealing damage. So the way this works is, well, might be a little bit different than you might think. So when I started playing him, I was a little bit confused why my deflect was always canceling, and there's 2 reasons for that. The first is that it's a channel effect. Well, it's because it's a channel effect, but it can be stopped for 2 reasons. So you can see here, this is basically deflect, and any damage that Genji takes will be not reflected in a flat amount. So anytime you take an instance of damage, it's going to reflect damage to the nearest hero. It shouldn't really say reflect. I guess it doesn't say reflect. I'm just using that word. But it's going to throw a kunai towards the nearest enemy prioritizing hero. So if you're against a hero that has very fast attacks, so for example, Tracer's auto attacks are very quick, Li Ming's Disintegrate will deal very, very quick instances of damage, Arthas's E will deal very quick instances of damage, And anytime you take an instance of damage, it deals you deal damage to a nearest enemy. So this can be pretty much useless for certain heroes. For example, if Leoric's just auto-attacking you, it's not going to really reduce, you're not going to be able to project any damage. Whereas if you're against a fast-attacking hero or enemy, you can produce a lot of damage. You can also proc this on any kind of structure or any kind of mercenary. Particularly of note is the boss on Brax's holdout. When it does its very quick shooting attack, you can deal a significant amount of damage. You'll basically instantly kill anyone around you. Or if you're attacking the machine gun camps on Brax's holdout or Warhead Junction, they attack very quickly, and if any nearby hero is near you, you'll pretty much instantly kill them with that as well. It has some kind of cheese effects. I don't really like the design of it, but that's how it works. And the other part I wanted to mention, of course, is that it's a channel effect, so it can be interrupted. This isn't the same as, Varian's Shield Wall or Medivh's Shield. I don't remember the name of the ability. It's not the same, for those abilities cannot be interrupted by CC, whereas this one can. So if I have the boss aggroed over here, and I cast my Protect or my Deflect just as the boss stuns, it'll block the damage, but the effect will be interrupted. So this means that you cannot use it just before, let's say, an Uther stun to prevent the rest of the damage that's going to follow up. So if you're playing Varian, you can always just press W, and if you get stunned by Uther for the next 1.25 seconds, you will also reduce all or prevent all damage. But with Genji, that's not true. The first stun or CC, so polymorph, silence, or stuns, will interrupt this, and you will take full damage. So this means that you have to play very carefully around CC, even though you can prevent a lot of damage. So Genji is obviously better against teams that don't have CC, because Deflect will get a lot more value, but that's something you can play around as well. Next ability we have is Swift Strike. So it has a 12-second cooldown, and you dash forward, dealing damage to all enemies in a line. Enemies that die within 2 seconds of being hit with Swift Strike cause the cooldown and mana to be refunded. So the ability just looks like this. Dash in a straight line. And this is one of the sources for Genji's mobility. In fact, one of 2 sources. We talk about cooldowns here, you can see how long the range actually is. And this can be interrupted. So Genji, although it looks like he moves instantly, he doesn't actually move instantly. He actually just travels very quickly from one point to the other. So he can be interrupted during this channel, or during this dash. So if he runs into a root, for example, Malfurion's root, it will cancel the effect. He will immediately be rooted. If he runs into a stun, say ETC just happens to slide, he will be instantly stunned. Or if ETC knocks him back, he will be interrupted from his dash as well. This dash does go through terrain. So unlike a lot of dashes in the game, pretty much every other dash in the game, it does go through all terrain, which is a little bit confusing, and it makes Genji extremely difficult to catch. Can also go through enemy walls. The other part of Swift Strike is that, of course, it does deal damage. It doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it does deal some damage. And it also resets if you get a kill within 2 seconds. You have to actually hit an enemy with Swift Strike to reset it, or an enemy has to die within 2 seconds after you hit. And this is essentially his janitor cleanup tool. So you can dash all over the place and then finish off enemies within 2 seconds with auto attacks or your shurikens or whatnot, or even your heroic, and then you can reset the ability and carry on with the fight. This also makes getting in and out. If you just want to go for 1 kill, you don't necessarily have to go for more than 1 kill. So if there's a kill, especially behind enemy gates, you can, obviously I'm not going to kill an enemy here because there's no enemy here, but I would essentially dash in, get a kill, and then dash out. And you can do that to secure a lot of kills. Genji's last basic ability is his D, which not all heroes have, but he does have one, and is a 10-second cooldown. It does not cost any mana, and you basically just activate it to jump anywhere you want. You can jump over terrain, you can jump over heroes, you can use it out of a mount, and it's basically just going to give you some additional mobility. Seems like a little bit of overkill, but it is actually quite useful, as you can imagine. And it's if you're trying to finish off an enemy with a kill, you can use these in combinations. You can get around the map fairly quickly. So if I use both, see that you can travel a fair bit of distance. Let's go over Genji's talents. Genji's talents are not actually the greatest. He doesn't have the greatest talents. They aren't the most impactful. Of course, they will help you because they are talents. They're going to give you a beneficial effect, but they're not as impactful as, say, Kael'thas's talents, which completely change how he works and gives him huge power spikes. He does have some power spikes, but they're not the biggest. So at level 1, we have Swift as the Wind. Hitting an enemy hero with Swift Strike increases Genji's movement speed by 30% or 3 seconds. Agile Dismount. While mounted, the range of Cyber Agility is increased by 70%, and its cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. Pathfinder. Jumping over terrain with Cyber Agility increases Genji's movement speed by 25% for 6 seconds. Okay, let's start with Pathfinder. Pathfinder, I wouldn't recommend taking. All these level 1 talents are generally preference. I think that Pathfinder is, though, the worst. So when you jump over any terrain here, it's going to give you 25% movement speed for 6 seconds. 6 seconds is actually quite a long time. That's might be the longest movement speed I can think of in the game that lasts. 6 seconds is a lot. I'm not really sure how the game registers when you're jumping over terrain or not. You can jump over walls as well, and it will give you the movement speed bonus. So any kind of terrain effect will give you the movement speed bonus. I don't really think this is practical. You're not really going to benefit from this too much. The other talents we have here are Agile Dismount. While mounted, the range of Cyber Agility is increased. So if I'm mounted here and dismount, you can see that the range is substantially increased. And the cooldown is should remove toggle cooldown so you can actually see the cooldown. The cooldown is reduced, and it's only 1 second longer than your mount time. You can pretty much immediately mount up. And sometimes when you're moving across the map with Agile Dismount, it's actually faster, not even to mount up, but to constantly dismount. This is especially good on maps like Braxis Holdout, where you can rotate from top to bottom very quickly with Cyber Agility, because the cooldown is only reduced it's only 5 seconds instead of 10 seconds. So this is very useful for ganking enemies, particularly. So let's say that I toggle minions here, so Arthas comes down the lane. Won't be able to kill him, obviously, but if I'm ganking an enemy lane, I can jump directly onto the hero, and then I have another Cyber Agility coming up shortly after, and I still have a Swift Strike after. So you have a lot of mobility for ganking. So my personal preference here is Agile Dismount at level 1. But as I said, it's kind of preference between what you think is, or what you're more comfortable taking. Swift as the Wind increases your movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds when you dash and hit an enemy. This is probably the most reliable that you'll get in the game, and you should probably go as the standard talent. But again, I prefer Agile Dismount. I think it depends on the map as well. Some maps you're going to get more benefit from having Cyber Agility, particularly maps that have more kind of jumping areas, where Swift as the Wind is more of kind of a brawler talent. Level 4, we have Shuriken Mastery. It's a quest talent, so hit enemy heroes with Shuriken. After hitting 35 heroes, Shuriken damage is increased by 30. After hitting 75 heroes, Cyber Agility now refunds 2 charges of Shuriken. So after hitting the 35 heroes, it's going to increase your damage by 30 for each hit, so a total of 90 additional damage. This does not scale. So some talents actually scale with your level, like I think Dragon Claw scales with your level. This does not. It's going to be a flat 90 damage. This is generally the best option at level 4. Of course, I'll go over the other ones. It's going to give you the most consistent damage, and hitting 35 heroes is really easy to do. Hitting 75 heroes is nice, but you're not, and it'll give you 2 additional charges of Shuriken, but it's not game breaking or anything. The bigger part is just the increased damage. Sometimes, of course, you will get some kills or some additional damage from the full quest talent, though. Strike at the heart. Enemies hit by the Endo Swift Strike take additional damage over 2 seconds. So you can see, if I take it here, there's now a little indicator at the very end of the ability, and if I Swift Strike this, you can see that they take additional damage. And the damage is actually quite significant. You can see that it's 471 damage for the base amount, and it's 303 damage for this talent. So you're going to do significantly more damage with Strike at the heart, but I think Shuriken Mastery kind of wins over it long term. Dragon Claw, after Genji blocks a flat amount of damage with Deflect, you can activate to release a Dragon Claw, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. So this is a talent that becomes active on your bar here. I don't really think this is it doesn't really do that much damage. If you compare it to, I don't remember the talent's called, I think it's called Surge or something on Cassia. Cassia's is a much, much better version. It's a lot easier to stack. This one only comes from deflect damage, so it's going to take a lot longer to stack, and it doesn't really do nearly as much damage when I can recall as well. Dragon Claw probably the worst at this tier. Shuriken Mastery probably the best, most reliable, but Swift Strike, or the Swift Strike version here, is also decent. Level 7, we have basically all defensive talents. Augmented Guard. When Deflect ends, Genji gains a shield equal to 50% of the damage blocked for 4 seconds. Perfect Defense. Deflected damage reduces the cooldown of deflect by 2 seconds up to a maximum of 10 seconds. So you can get up to a 6-second cooldown instead of a 16-second cooldown. Cyber Agility. Using Cyber Agility grants 50 spell armor for 2 seconds and dodged. Genji dodges 1 hero basic attack every 5 seconds, stores up to 3 charges. So Augmented Guard is probably the most consistent option here most of the time, and it's just going to give you a shield afterwards, so pretty straightforward. Perfect Defense isn't realistic for most of the time, although you will be able to reduce the cooldown if you take any damage. That includes minions, structures, whatever. Most of the time, you'll just gain more benefit from Augmented Guard. Of course, there are some scenarios where this can be better. So if they have a lot of fast attacking heroes and they have no CC, Perfect Defense is probably the better option between these two. But most of the time, Augmented Guard will be better. Cyber Agility, while it is nice, the 50 spell armor isn't realistic. You'll probably just gain more benefit from taking the other defensive talents once again. And Dodge is actually very, very good. So if they have, it's basically a better block version. So block, of course, can be 75%, and you gain 2 charges. And this is 100%, and it's every 5 seconds, and you gain 3 charges. So it's a much better version of normal block. I wouldn't get this if you're against fast attacking heroes, obviously. So if they have Tracer, Zarya, Tassadar, etc., you know the drill. I wouldn't get Dodge, but if they have Zeratul, Nova, even like a Vala or Cassia, Dodge is probably the better option. This Dodge is extremely good. If you can, if it's a situation where Dodge is going to get value, I'd always take Dodge here. Otherwise, go Augmented Guard.
Choose a talent.
Level 10, we have Genji's Heroics. So the first heroic I'm going to go over is Dragon Blade. You unleash Dragon Blade for 8 seconds. While active, Genji Dragon Blade can be reactivated to lunge forward and dash in a huge arc, dealing damage every time you strike. If enemy heroes are killed within 2 seconds of being hit by Dragon Blade, Swift Strike's cooldown is reset.
Choose a talent.
So the ability is Genji's heroic or his ultimate from Overwatch, and it pretty much functions the same way. So he says a bunch of gibberish, and then you can strike in a large arc. Then an 8-second cooldown, so you'll only be able to get a few strikes in, and if you hit an enemy within 2 seconds, they die within 2 seconds of you hitting them, your Swift Strike will be reset. Oops. So you can also do damage on the initial lunge here, so it will hit right in front, and you can do damage in a wide arc. Go over the other heroic before I talk about viability, because both of his heroics are viable.
Choose a talent. Choose a talent.
So X Strike is the other heroic, and is the same cooldown, and you perform 2 slashes dealing damage. The slashes detonate after 1.25 seconds, causing an additional much larger amount of damage to enemies in their area.
Choose a talent.
So the ability looks like this. Most of the damage, however, comes from that final strike. So you can see that, cast it again here. It's going to do damage, and then a third amount of damage. And basically you're going to take X Strike when the enemy team has a lot of CC and you're not able to get value from Dragon Blade. Also, if they have a lot of healing, so if you need the burst damage, so if they have double support, Dragon Blade probably won't get as much value. If they have single support and they don't have a lot of CC, Dragon Blade's pretty much always going to be better. But if they have a lot of CC and they have double support, we're not able to get because not only does Dragon Blade do more sustained, consistent damage, but you also are very vulnerable to being hit while you're using Dragon Blade because you're basically within melee range. X Strike is going to do all of its damage up front, and you're not going to be vulnerable to CC. You can also use it to dodge abilities like Hunt or whatever because you're invulnerable while casting it. So both of these are totally viable. I think it has like a 50% split in terms of popularity, and they're both perfectly good. Most of the time, I would go Dragon Blade, but X Strike is. I should probably be going X Strike more than I am. Level 13, we have Shinigami. Hitting an enemy with all 3 shurikens deals bonus damage. The bonus damage is quite significant, so 252 compared to 143. So you're going to get just less than 2 more shurikens. So you're going to basically almost hit with 5 shurikens now. If you hit all 3, it'll make 5, if that makes sense. Flow like water, each enemy hero hit with Swift Strike reduces its cooldown by 3 seconds. And double jump. Cyber Agility restores 2 charges, but its cooldown is increased by 5 seconds. So this is where his talents kind of get pretty useless. 13, 16, they're pretty useless for the most part. Not nearly as effective as other characters at 13 and 16. but they're still good. Obviously, they're still going to give you some power. So Shinigami is what I like to take most of the time, and that's for a couple of reasons. So as I said earlier in the video, it is difficult to hit a target with all three shurikens, but if you are able to do it with Shinigami, you're going to be very rewarded with the amount of damage that you can do. So it's going to significantly increase your damage, especially burst damage, and you can almost, if you actually are able to hit all three charges of shuriken with Shinigami, it's going to do an incredible amount of damage. So let's just look at how much damage that you can deal. So I'm going to complete my level 4 quest,
Choose a
take this
talent.
talent. I'm going to try not auto attack here. And I missed. Okay. I'm trying to move while I'm casting, so I'm not auto attacking. It's going to do 2300 damage, which is quite a lot for just 3 charges. And these charges also obviously work on mercenary camps. So this also gives you a lot better camp clear against one major camp, and it also works against structures, so it gives you a lot of siege potential as well. Or if you're trying to burn down a keep or a fort or something, you'll be able to do significantly more damage. The other options are flow like water. The problem I have with this talent is that you're usually using Swift Strike not as an opener, because in this sense you're using it as an opener because you're going to say, hey, I'm not going to get a reset. I'll benefit from this talent because it'll give me cooldown reduction. And you usually want to use Swift Strike as your janitor tool, as your cleanup tool. And if you're using it as your cleanup tool, it's going to be instantly reset. You're not going to benefit from this talent at all. Double jump, you you usually don't need 2 charges in a row. Like he already has so much mobility, it's kind of overkill, and then you're just putting it on cooldown for an increase of five more seconds per charge. So I don't really find that these are beneficial. So I feel like you're forced to go Shinigami because these two are just utter crap. Although you're not going to always benefit from Shinigami. It's actually quite difficult to hit all 3 charges. Like it takes some time to learn. Once you do master it, this is a very good talent. But if you're new at Genji, you're going to find basically no use from any of these talents here. Reflect, or level 16, sorry. We have Reflect. Deflect also deals an additional 33% of the damage blocked. Final Cut. After 1 second, Swift Strike deals an additional amount of damage to all enemies in the area. And Steady Blade. Each enemy hero hit by Swift Strike increases the damage of the next Swift Strike by 20%. This bonus damage stacks up to 3 times. So I feel like most people are going to reflect here, and although it can be viable, especially if you go maybe perfect defense against a low CC team, you might get some viability from this. But most of the time, it's just it's gonna the talent sounds better than it actually is. You won't really benefit from the 33% damage blocked. Most of the time, you'll just reduce maybe a bit of burst. It's very rare that you'll reduce like a precision strike from Nova or something, or some kind of other insane burst, and you won't really benefit from this. You'll actually benefit more from one of these other 2 talents. So Final Cut is my preferred talent at 16. Steady Blade is kind of similar to the 13 version, where you're trying to hit multiple targets with your E, but that's not really realistic. Instead, Swift Strike,
Choose
you
a
can see
talent.
here that it's just going to cast it again shortly afterwards, and it's going to do more than half the amount of more than 50% damage on your E, so your E almost gains 50% damage increase. Whereas Steady Blade, you can get up to 60%, and it's on the initial strike, so it's more reliable to hit, but it's very difficult to hit multiple heroes. This skill is actually very, very thin and deceptively difficult to hit. Again, it might when you're actually in a game and you're trying to finish off a hero, it's going to take some time to actually make sure you're hitting Swift Strike every single time. So Steady Blade, I wouldn't say is the most viable here. It's still a good talent, but I'd say Final Cut is better. I'd say Reflect, sorry. Keeping Reflect and Deflect mixed up. I'm sure they meant to do that. I'd say this is probably the worst talent at 16. I would go Final Cut. Steady Blade could be viable, but I prefer Final Cut. Level 20, we have a bunch of interesting talents. So all of these are viable in some way. Some are better than others, of course. So we have Dragon Becomes Me. Each time Dragon Blade hits an enemy hero, the duration of Dragon Blade is increased by 1 second. So if you're hitting 2 heroes with each hit, you'll increase the duration by 2 seconds, of course. And basically just going to increase the duration of Dragon Blade. Living Weapon. Each enemy hero hit by X-Strike reduces its cooldown by 12 seconds. So as I mentioned, X-Strike hits multiple times. It hits, I think, up to 3 times if enemies are in the center, twice otherwise. and it's going to reduce the cooldown every time it hits a hero. So you can hit, if you hit a single target in the middle here, when you're hitting 3 targets, it's going to reduce the cooldown by 36 seconds. So if you're hitting 2 heroes in the middle, it's going to reduce the cooldown by 72 seconds. So you can see where this is going, where it's going to significantly reduce the cooldown if you're using a team fight. I think this is super underrated. I don't really see people taking it that often. Maybe it's just me, but I think this is actually quite a good talent. Sharpen Stars, shurikens now pierce all enemies hit, and you can hit multiple enemies with, you can benefit from multiple enemies with Shinigami, but of course that's pretty difficult to do. You're not really going to be able to pierce multiple enemies and get all 3 shurikens on them. Their option here is Zanjin, so block 6,500 damage with Deflect, including damage blocked so far, and Deflect will hit all nearby enemy heroes. So not all nearby enemies, it doesn't work on minions, of course, but will work on all nearby enemy heroes. And this is very easy to stack. Usually you'll have a lot more than 6,500 damage, at least I have with my experience with Genji. And I see most people getting this talent at level 20, but I don't really agree with that. I think all 3 other options are better than this. You're going to get, of course, some highlight reels where people kill the entire enemy team with this talent in the level 16 talent and the level 7 talent, but it's just not practical and not reliable and not consistent. So I don't advise going Zanjin, although sometimes it does have its uses. Sharpened Stars is probably the most consistent talent that you're going to get here. It's just a nice baseline upgrade, but in most fights you won't really benefit from this. If this was an earlier talent, this would be amazing, but now that's level 20, you're not really going to benefit from hitting multiple heroes in a fight. It's probably still the most consistent option, like I said, but I personally don't like this talent, but I know that a lot of Genji players do like this talent, especially high-level Genjis. Dragon Becomes Me is the upgrade for your Dragon Blade, and I actually think this talent is very, very underrated, especially if you're able to just live through the fight. Even if you're only you can you're only going you're chasing like one hero and you finish them off and you can go to the rest of the team, it's going to significantly increase the duration. So you basically have Dragon Blade up for the entire fight. So if you have like an Uther with a D shield for late game, you'll just completely destroy the enemy team. I think this is also definitely the most fun upgrade at level 20, at least from my experience. I think this is pretty good and also underrated. I think it's one of the least picked talents. So if you haven't taken this talent yet, I'd advise that you at least try it out. And again, Living Weapon is really good as well. It significantly reduces the cooldown. So in my opinion, if you're going X Strike, I would take the Living Weapon upgrade, and if you're going Dragon Blade, I would take the Dragon Becomes Me. Some people again like going Sharpened Stars. Some people like going Zenjin, but my preference is, of course, the upgrades for your heroics. That's pretty much the video. I just wanted to talk about matchups really quickly. Genji works very well if you have 2 supports in your team. If you're playing Genji, you have to always be doing damage. Genji is a very micro-intensive hero and very much a max-min hero. So you want to make sure that you're looking for kills at every opportunity. And again, I mean, it kind of fits the meme where Genji needs healing, but really, if you're playing Genji as aggressive as you need to, you do need a lot of healing, and you want to make sure that you're very much on the lookout for crowd control as well. So any stun, silence, any kind of those effects, because that will completely negate all of your mobility. And of course, that'd be pretty bad. He's good on pretty much every map, although again, his wave clear is quite bad. So any kind of wave clear maps will be less good, I guess you could say, for Genji. He's better on bigger maps where wave clear is less important. So Towers of Doom, he's pretty good. Pretty good on Hanamura. He's pretty good on Cursed Hollow, etc. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Peace.